As I always say, my coffee should not be stronger than your password.
I don't know. Your coffee will get up and walk over, and it's a whole different ballgame.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to episode 466 of the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me is Donna Grindle of Carton. What's up, Donna?
I am. Yeah, we don't record early in the mornings anymore. We're both moving around too much these days, and then summertime holidays, and we got to adapt accordingly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of adapting accordingly, today we're going to be talking about how can SMBs do SSO. And some of you may not know what that term even is, but we'll talk more about that. Doing single sign-on. You know, most of you may even do it. You just don't know what it's called.
Or you do it, a little of it, not a lot of it, or some of it sometimes, but you don't know that's it.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, we don't know what that is. Sure you do.
Yeah.
It's like I was talking to a group the other day, and we talked about multi-factor authentication, and I was like, how many people's ever used it? And like half the people didn't raise their hand. And I was like, how many people's ever used an ATM? And everybody raised their hand. I'm like, then you've used multi-factor authentication.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you go somewhere and they're like, yeah, we need 2 forms of ID. Well, there you go. There's your multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, simplify.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, before we dive into that, we do want to say, as always, thanks for those who listen, who follow, and share. We appreciate it.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks when you send us special little presents.
Oh, yeah. By the way, shout out to George.
Yeah. Special little presents for each of us.
Yeah. So thank you, George Fenton. So before he left Ireland, he picked us up a little bit of something, sent it. So definitely appreciate that.
Hooked us up.
I know. I was like, check it out. I get a box in the mail and it's got George's name on it. Like all giddy. Oh, let me open it. See what it is. But yeah, he's awesome. I appreciate that, George. If you're listening, which I know you are, thanks. I appreciate it. All right. So let's dive right into it and get to the question of why SMBs don't deploy single sign-on. Because CISA created a white paper on that and discussed it. So we're going to discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, they published like their own little study they did, and there's an article that says, hey, why is this not happening? And, a little flyer that summarizes it. And if you really want to get, nerdy with it, you can go into we'll have links to everything, but the study itself has, some pretty interesting information in it. But it's definitely a thing that they kind of they had mentioned it before. They did the Secure by Design white paper. That was their call to action for vendors to build things secure first, which is something, we've talked about often. It's like, dude, we got this great cool thing and we get it all tested, and how do we secure it? Oh, man, we got to do that now. Well, we'll slap a little on here. It's not built in. It's not baked in to every plan and every app. And so that was what they were really talking about. But a big chunk of it was this single sign-on, SSO, where you log in one place and then it knows how to log in everywhere else. That kind of concept. And in there, white paper, they pointed out that they recommend that essential security features should be available as part of the basic service offering because, and I liked what they called it, that consumers should not need to pay premium pricing, hidden charges, or additional fees for basic security hygiene. In particular, we mentioned that single sign-on capability should be available by default as part of the base offering. Consumers should not need to bear an onerous SSO tax to get this necessary security measure. And that's an interesting way to put it, and it's not wrong. You know? I mean, there's a lot of things where it's like, you got to upgrade to another version if you're going to use that.
Yeah. Well, I think it falls into that camp of it used to be a luxury premium item, and it's coming down to the point where it's now basic security, which we see that in a lot of different things. 5 years ago, everything we're using now was like, yeah, that's advanced security. Now it's basic security.
Well, and I think another point they're trying to make is we should have never looked at it that way.
Right.
We should have said, why are we okay without this kind of security? Because had we not just pushed it out onto the individual to remember all these passwords, which we know they're not doing well.
Right.
And we've known it. And that's what this is for. And so the discussion is really, you made it a premium when it really should have been baked in from the beginning, and we would be in a better place today.
Yeah. But at the same time, we've got a lot of vendors out there that's not even fully adopted SSO, or I'm sorry, MFA.
Right. And that's the big picture right there, is the vendors aren't baking in to their products these security features. You should have started with it, kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we still have some that you can't even do more than an 8-character password. and
nothing freaks me out more than to stumble on those. Oh my God, but there are plenty out there.
Yeah. It's like, dude, we passed this 10 years ago. What are you doing?
Yeah. And like, if, I had a complexity tool at one point on one of the logins that we had to one of our sites that, for training, and it would not, the passwords that met the requirements for their EHR would not pass the requirements for my training login. And I'm like, okay, that's scary that I have to downgrade. I had to downgrade, because I was making them create more complex things to get into training than they were having to do to get into an EHR. That is not right.
Yeah. As I always say, my coffee should not be stronger than your password.
I don't know. Your coffee will get up and walk over, and it's a whole different ballgame. So, but just let's step back just a second and make sure that we kind of, I mean, you can assume from what we're saying, but basically SSO is you have one master key that gets into everything. And you can simulate that with password managers. I mean, I really only worry about knowing a couple of complex passwords, but SSO takes it to another level. And the difference is shocking once people actually get to do SSO, because when you go to the site, your existence is already identified and you're logged in. You don't go because you're logged into your main. I'm trying to figure out how to explain the difference between, solid use of a password manager. Yes, I don't have to remember all of these, but you are creating them.
Right.
And so that means they have those accounts to get breached.
Yeah. My fear with SSO is kind of my same fear with password managers. Mm-hmm. The technology is not the problem. It's the users. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm using SSO, and let's just say I'm doing it through Google, click on here, use your Google account to log in. Now, if somebody's Google account gets breached, because, how many times do people just give away their access to their accounts? Pretty frequently, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. Now they potentially have access to other things.
Yeah. Well, then it goes back to, now I can say, I'm going to put these confines into the password so that it leads you through creating a passphrase, mm-hmm. not a password. And if you create a passphrase, way better off. And I'm going to make you do MFA in a more secure way. If I do those two things to get into the SSO, mm-hmm. I've severely reduced the likelihood. Now, I'm not saying it's gone, but now I can worry specifically about making that like as walled off secure as possible. And you have to trust that the security vendor is going to do their part in keeping the back end. And then I can work with the user to get that one, now I'm just focused on that one. Please. Mm-hmm. I'm only asking you to come up with one, not 52.
Right.
And if you do this, there are fewer steps. You can quickly move from app to app. Mm-hmm. Because you don't actually go through the login process on a true SSO. You're technically already logged into everything when you get there.
Right.
In true SSO, the single sign-on. So in this discussion, and you can see there's plenty to discuss. Mm-hmm. And David and I go through this discussion frequently. We've talked about it many times just between the two of us, which is basically why we have this podcast.
You're just here to listen to us talk to each other.
we discuss. This is like our normal discussions. But in their review, they do go into an explanation as, the primary purpose of the service is the efficiency and effectiveness, so that you're doing one centralized access that then immediately would then log you into all of these other systems the minute you got there. You weren't going through additional steps. So it's great. But, and I'm gonna, when I bring this part up, you'll know why I'm like, David's gonna have something to say about this. An example of, this manual process is where individuals depend on spreadsheets or collaborative documents to keep track of their passwords. Mm. Okay, what do you got to share?
Yeah.
What just happened?
So, yeah, the same conference I was just recently speaking at, a guy says, he's like, well, I keep all my passwords in a Excel document on my computer.
Called passwords.
Honestly, yeah, called passwords. And for him, he was basically saying, this is the way I secure my passwords. Aren't you proud of me? But I thought he was joking. Like, okay, this guy's, heckling me or whatever, trying to figure out what, how he's going to, how I'm going to respond to this. And it's just a joke, but no, he was serious. And I had to stop and like, oh, you're serious. You seriously do that?
Don't.
Yeah. I was like, no, let's talk about why that's not good. And then somebody was like, well, what if you use password protected Excel sheet? And I'm like, great question. Still not good. Those very easy to find tools to break through Excel passwords fairly quickly. So no, those aren't good.
No, that is not the solution. And it is unfortunate that there are so many cases of that it's still happening with really important passwords and login capability. And, and by the time you go through now, I know I spend a ton of time with my team where they need something and my account's the only one that can do it, and I have to have MFA, so I can't just say, here, you go log in as me. That world is gone. And, we only need my account. We don't need a bunch. They just need to go get some information. So, like, one of the services we use, I'm, like, in a chat with them, like, why do I have to go log in to your site and get the receipts so that I can send them over to the bookkeeper? I am manually going and doing this every month because you don't have the capability to, A, let someone else log in and get them. I could give them authority to just do that, but you don't let me. Or B, email it automatically, this receipt, invoice and receipt, email it automatically to me so that I can put it in my automation. There's no way to get it out of their system without logging in and going and navigating to it. So now I'm going to use one of my robot tools that's got to find its way, and that's not an easy pass.
Right.
So, and I'm like, and they're like, we're so sorry, we'll take your feedback. And I'm like,
We'll add it to our list.
I'm required to do this, and my time is the most expensive time I have.
Yeah.
And I have no other choices because of your choices. So it's the same thing with the vendors. They're making it hard. So they're looking at, in this document, they hit on, what are the barriers that are keeping us from getting there? Well, we've hit on a ton of them already, but, the SSO tax, it's the expense of it. They're perceived to be costly because every time you turn around, well, you have to upgrade. You have to have a better account. You have to blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And when you're already combating the spend on IT and cybersecurity, then you start getting pushback. Like, do we really need this? If we're going to spend X dollars, should we spend it here or should we be spending it somewhere else?
Yeah.
We still have the pushback of just getting people to understand that what was advanced security a few years ago is now basic. So you need to constantly upgrade to more and bigger and better things. And, wasn't that long ago, where literally your cybersecurity budget was like $99 a year. And now it's, $99 a month.
Yeah. And then the next thing is the complexity of implementation. And because it's complex, then you have to spend on having technical expertise to set up and manage these things.
Yeah, the cost of the tools are cheap. And, we talked about that recently where it's, your tools are, let's say it's $4 a license a month. Well, but you're paying a guy $80,000 a year or more, to manage the back end of it, the administrative and cost of that, to monitor and manage and administrate that is the cost. That's where the biggest cost comes.
Whoever, they have to have a certain level of skill, whoever is implementing and managing these, because they aren't, let me put it this way. We have the capability, like through Google Workspace and LastPass, we can create all of this SSO stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You have to upgrade on some of it. So yes, directly that. Some of it we're already on that release and we could do it. We already have, for other reasons, the premium product that includes SSO. And every time I say, you know what, we're going to do this, and I go in there and it's too much of a PITA for me.
Yeah. Trying to implement it is too complicated.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like I could do it. I don't have the time to invest in doing it. And I don't want to spend the money of my own time, even if I did. And so, I mean, just those two. If I do have the premium product for whatever reason, then when I sit down to use it, that becomes like a nightmare. So, big problem there. Those first two, no doubt about it. Now, the rest of them, I don't struggle with for obvious reasons. Until we get down to the end, there's one. But the next thing after cost and complexity was the lack of awareness and understanding, and that is absolutely it. No one understands what they're doing when we talk about it. So that's why we're doing this episode, so people would understand it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know the value of it, and you never experienced it, like it is really cool to not have to worry about that. And you don't, like, just create an account here, and then it'll automatically manage all these other things. It's great.
Yeah. It's like when, inside of our academy, our club, you would click on, for example, you log into the site, and then we had other things connected to that, still do, that are different platforms. But when you click on the link, you just go right into it. It just automatically, it just lets you in. And so that's part of what it is. But I think the lack of understanding and awareness also plays back into the other two, which is even when there is a little bit of awareness or understanding, it's like, oh, hey, I wonder what this costs. And then now you're jumping back into the cost concerns and the complexity of implementing it.
Right.
And so at that point, if you're like me, it's like, okay, I don't need to know anything else about it because we can't do it.
Yeah. Just move on.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah. We're done learning about this.
Mm-hmm. So the fourth thing that it brought up was security concerns, which is your single point of failure concern.
Right. Yeah.
Now, they call it a misconception.
Maybe.
CISA's belief. And it is. I mean, it's a reasonable thing to ask. But is it a reason not to do it? I don't think so. It's like any other risk management. I get it that is a huge problem and the impact would be massive. So what I have to do is virtually eliminate the likelihood that can happen as close to zero as possible. And I can do that by locking that one down. I'd rather lock that one down and work on that than try to lock down 20. Whole lot easier.
Yeah. The other thing about it too is, I mean, there's been a couple of high profile breaches recently with SSO providers. And so that doesn't help the conversation because as a consumer has no other awareness and understanding other than, oh, I saw this headline where this vendor had a data breach. And, it's like when LastPass had their, pick one, clients come in and like, aren't we using LastPass? And then now we're up against the wall having to either justify staying or finding a new vendor or whatever the case might be. But even if it's not that big of a deal, or even if they've improved the security, there's still that
perception,
that thought of, should we be looking at something else? Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Yeah,
because that is another thing. Once you invest, you're all in. It's not, and I mean, you and I, we've been discussing this since the LastPass data breach of weighing the cost and complexity of moving to a new solution because of how we use these tools and how integrated they are in our environment versus the risk. And it's the same thing. I mean, we have that same issue. So I think we'll continue to have this no matter how we approach it, whether we even move to this, the higher level of your identity management. So I give you an identity,
Mm-hmm.
not a login. You have an identity. And then all your logins are tied to your identity. And that becomes like, anyway, whole nother, that's advanced kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's like your badge into the site.
Everything is, I am me. I promise, I'm me. Some days I'm better at being me than others, but every day I'm me. Kind of like.
Yeah. I don't think you have to worry about deep fakes on you. It's impossible to deep fake Donna.
Ask it just a few questions, you'll know. But the next step, though, is perceived incompatibility with existing systems. So if I adopt this SSO solution, let's say I'm willing to invest the money and handle the complexity, I understand the technology, I accept that the security, now I got to make sure it works with all my vendors.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, like what I was talking about, I have multiple options. I look at it, well, this one works with this one, and this one works with the other group. They're not all integrated. So perceived incompatibility, a lot of times that's not unrealistic.
As I say, it's not perceived as actual.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, it's not as bad as it used to be.
Right.
And it depends on your sector. Like, if you're in accounting, there's a handful of things that you need. They're not as broad as, say, in healthcare.
Mm-hmm. Number
6, there's 7 that we pulled out of here. 6 is implementing SSO requires a significant investment of time and resources, which can be a major hurdle for SMBs with limited IT staff and resources, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
It's a task.
Yeah. This gets back into what I was saying earlier. It's like, okay, whenever you do start having some awareness and understanding, you're like, oh, wait a minute, we don't have time for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you take it to the last piece is there are very few of these SSO vendors or vendors that offer SSO capabilities that really are targeting SMBs.
Mm-hmm.
They treat it the same, like, it's that changing the mindset that this should have been basic security all along.
Oh yeah.
That's the mindset, not just that now this is basic security, but this should have been basic security all along. And that's the mindset that I think needs to happen.
Yeah. Well, so then I guess that brings us to what are the recommendations from CISA?
Yeah, they interestingly have recommendations for the SMBs and then some others for the vendors they call recommendations. Basically, they're saying y'all need to do this. So, step 1 is analysis and assessment.
As always.
If you skip this part, the rest of them don't work. They're not going to be right. You're going to miss something. But, how many users do you have? What applications are being used? And what security requirements do your primary applications require? Well, if you're doing a proper SRA, you should already know that.
Right.
At least know enough to now go ask questions about their SSO capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
That you just have to add in that level of, if I'm not doing it, let me go ask, how is it authenticated? And then based on that assessment, you determine what your solutions are, what kind of solution, and then look for the options, which basically kind of go together. They make a point that the cloud-based solutions don't require extensive infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that this is not across the board, a necessarily always true statement, but you're out in all of these different small businesses all the time, working with them. How many of them still rely on on-prem infrastructure versus cloud? I mean, is it a percentage? Is it 75 cloud, 25 still, or do most of them now rely on the cloud?
I'm seeing more and more people that are getting away from certain infrastructure altogether. Like if you'd asked me a few years ago, if you had, for example, an organization with 50 computers, I would say you absolutely have to have a server. I mean, there's no way around it. But I have clients that have 50 plus computers and they don't have a server, not even a cloud server. Just because of the way the business functions, they can run everything through 365 or Google or whatever, and they don't necessarily care about having that authentication piece of it. But to answer the question, it's kind of all over the place, but there's still a good many people who have infrastructure that is still physical infrastructure.
So when you have to, because of knowing that, you have to be aware of, the next time you need a server upgrade, you may toss it. So do you want to build this plan on, building it on the server, even if it's a virtual server, and how you do those things? I mean, there's tons of options that will do. I mean, like Jump Cloud, I think Duo has one.
Yeah, Azure AD, they got all kind of stuff. But then
Okta,
you throw in,
that's a huge one.
Yeah, Okta, Duo. But then you throw in like the article I read yesterday, which was 50% of people that are in cloud solutions have suffered some type of data breach because of that cloud vendor. And it's, I've had people tell me that, they probably would see themselves going back to on-prem from the cloud because, they don't trust the vendors. And it seems to be a less risky footprint to have their own stuff. And, that's an argument. You could argue either way.
Yeah.
I could argue that it's much easier for the vendor to protect the stuff than you.
Yeah.
But
at least they have the skills.
Yeah, they have the skills. On the other side of the argument, it's, well, I'm a smaller target as an individual small business than this big vendor is. And you know what? You're both right. But what decision are you going to make?
Yeah, you're a smaller target, but without when they stumble on you and realize you're a smaller target, they know that they can use you to get to other things. And, all bets are off because they will be able to get past most. Now, if they're bringing in a vendor that is truly managing it for them, different ballgame, but you're going to invest in that security one place or another. So right. It is a huge issue, but again, it goes back to if the vendors were building things secure first. Security first.
How about that? What a novel idea.
Let's worry about security first. So anyway, you're going in, you're comparing all these vendors. There's so many different solutions, different methods, different ways you could handle this. And you have to, more than likely, you're going to have some sort of assistance in doing that to evaluate it and to see, what'll work with what's the best solution for the right price that works on my current infrastructure and what my future plans are and the applications I need to run my business. I mean, that's a big question. That's a huge ask. And then you conduct a pilot project, and minimizing risks is great, but you got to do it in a baby steps to make sure you don't skip something.
Well, plus you don't want to roll it out, organization wide, and then there'd be a problem. Now you've got this major issue.
Oh yeah. I mean, even in our tiny little group of 4, Chris and I will try things for the 2 of us first before we even think about rolling it out to the other 2 who speak English.
I was going to say, you should do it like you and Carla, because Carla's great at breaking stuff.
I know, right? That's why she was like really big in quality control back when we had the Sirius. She could break anything. I'm like, how? Why would you even think of doing what you just did that broke this? I mean, it never occurred to me that someone would even do it that way.
And she's like, it never occurred to me that you wouldn't do it that way.
No, right? That's the difference. But then you have to have, your training and really basically rebuild the way you look at passwords and security.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you have to do your ongoing monitoring and security and all that kind of stuff. So that's what you would expect. I mean, that's what we talk about you would do in implementing any solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that last piece there, I think, deserves a little bit extra looking into, because oftentimes there's the cost of the tool or the solution, and then there's the cost of ownership. So not any different than buying a expensive car. Like, I can afford a whatever Lamborghini. I can afford to buy it. I just can't afford to keep it. So that's kind of the same thing here is there is that upfront cost of the tool and getting it in place and all that. But what about the other cost involved in monitoring it and administrating it and all that, which we mentioned earlier?
TCO.
Yeah. Total cost of ownership.
And it is it should be part of every decision, regardless of the solution that you're looking at. Is you're going to need to be monitoring what's happening with it. And unfortunately, you've probably got apps right now. You're not solutions that are in play that nobody's monitoring. Mm-hmm. So you definitely don't want to put new ones in that don't have that built in. That should be built into the plan of actually implementing. What the? How many different words did I just blend together there? Implementation.
Like I said, you can't deep fake Donna.
No, you can't. It's like the brain just mashed a whole bunch of words ago. But it needs to be part of your overall implementation plan, regardless of what you're implementing, even if it's just, I'm upgrading things. Well, if I'm upgrading things, let me put this thing in that I'm not doing well. Let me add it in here.
Yeah.
So that should be those steps are the steps for any process that an SMB needs to do. Now they lay them out, and that's helpful. Mm-hmm. But you should always follow those steps, not just for this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then CISA's like, okay, let's talk to the vendors a minute. Let's give you some things that we suggest. Yeah. And there's only 3.
Yeah. There's just 3 recommendations.
Yeah. So here, the first one I find interesting. I'm going to read it. Separate basic services like SSO from premium service bundles to avoid upselling unnecessary services. So here's my question. At what point do those premium services become basic? And you see what I'm saying? Because now we're back in the same loop again.
Well, but the bundles generally aren't security bundles, right? If there are some applications that, and I think it's talking about, the vendors that allow SSO, right?
Right.
I'm not going to allow SSO unless you're at this higher level. The higher level, SSO is just a tiny piece.
Kind of like we won't sign a BAA unless you're paying.
I know, right? Yeah. And it goes back to, again, this should have been considered basic all along.
Right.
Security should have been considered basic all along. And so it's not the SSO solution, it's the vendors that are allowing you to utilize that. Well, you can do SSO if you XYZ.
Right. So the second one here, though, we do struggle with this even in the MSP world, which is they suggest offering a flexible schedule of seat thresholds. And we see this often where there's this fantastic tool out there, and I'm like, yes, I want it. I want to offer it to my clients. And they're like, great, you need to buy 50 licenses up front or 100 licenses. I'm like, dude,
I haven't sold one yet.
Yeah. And, and they've got all these clever marketing sales tips of, we can do a ramp up or just include it in your offering. I hate that. Just include it in your offer. Okay, I can just include it, but my cost just went up.
Yeah.
So I can't just include it unless I also just include a bump in the cost across everybody at the same time. And then it goes into, there's not just the cost of this tool. I get it but it's only $2 a license, David. Yeah, it's $2 for the license, but how much is it going to cost me to now train somebody and put them on this tool to monitor and manage it? That's where the cost is, not your $2 a license. And so, when they come up and they have these minimums like that, it's difficult. We run into this, not just SSO stuff, but just across the board. And I get it. I understand why they do it, but it makes it very difficult to be able to offer some of the more premium security products.
Oh, absolutely. So this idea of, they're saying consider pooling these licenses at your MSP or some other kind of small business group level. And that one is an interesting one. And you've seen, we used to see a lot of this going on of independent physician organizations and where you bundle your buying power, right? The group will purchase and then essentially lease out. And it's not the MSP, it's the organization of small businesses that are doing it, whether it's a local, even like a Chamber of Commerce kind of scenario. It could be any of those kinds of organizations, and I don't see that happening as much now as it was there for a period of time. Do you?
No, I don't see that at all.
And I think that's one of the things that they're really suggesting here is not just the MSP, but give me that ability. God, TechSoup. Remember that? I don't even know if that's still around. But
it's still around.
Nonprofits use that a lot, and it's the same concept. Is you buy through them, and they confirm that you're a nonprofit, and you get access to these reduced pricing options. Well, that's essentially what we need to do for small business.
Yeah, well, we are doing that to some degree through MSPs, like I said, those thresholds, because I can buy 50 or 100 licenses. It gives these businesses that have 5 computers and 10 computers the ability to have access to tools and software and security that they otherwise wouldn't have access to without buying a bunch of licenses.
Right. And so we do have that capability, but they're saying offer more of that to allow David to turn around and say, yeah, this would be $2 and we're going to be able to get it to you for 50 cents. What those kinds of scenarios, because the third piece is to provide the SMBs with necessary support and training, which gets back to the complexity of the whole thing. It is, if it's complex enough that I don't want to fool with it, I'm not going to say I can't do it. I'm saying I don't want to fool with it. It needs to be something that I don't have to invest a ton of time in. When my team's small enough, I can manage it, but I would love to be able to do it.
Right.
We have it. We have the technology. We can build it. But the more that you look at, and while this is just talking about SSO, there are plenty of other security solutions. Let's talk about SIMs. Let's talk about, not Sims like David Sims, but SIEM.
Some of the video game.
Yeah, or the video game. But, the SIEM solutions is a similar kind of scenario of, it's something that, you've recently come up with some really good affordable solutions where we're even taking advantage of what you're bringing in. Yes, we're one of David's clients now, I know. Wait, what? But again, that gets back to, I don't want to fool with it, even though I can. I have the technical skills. Mm-hmm. And I just don't, I have way more to invest in for my time than doing those things, even though, my propeller would be spinning and I'd be all excited and not, but the team's like, these other things that we need you to do where, people are really want you to do those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I tell people all the time when they're talking about, well, can I do this or whatever? I'm like, yeah, look, I can mow my own lawn.
Yeah.
But I don't because my time is better spent doing these other things that my business should be doing. Now, that's why I don't get it when somebody's like, yeah, I'm a surgeon and I do my own IT. I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
I know. It's like,
or I spent all day long working on this printer problem. I'm like, dude, you're a doctor. Why are you spending all day on a printer problem?
Yeah, I actually had a conversation one time with a doctor who, back when we did IT support, and the doctor's like, well, I didn't want to call you and pay you to do this, but I've already spent 4 hours on the phone with Microsoft and 2 hours trying to, and I said, how many patients could you have seen?
Exactly.
In that amount of time? How many medical records could you have reviewed in that amount of time rather than paying for 1 hour of my time?
Exactly. Yep.
So, yes, it is a give and take.
Yep. All right, folks. That is our show for today, talking about SSO. So go look into it. See if it's something that you think you might want to learn more about. That way you can increase your awareness and understanding.
Yeah, check it out. But it is a great discussion, and I think that the topics that it covers, while it's focused on SSO, I think it's a much broader conceptual discussion that has to do with SMB, access to what we consider reasonable security standards. And I again believe that our biggest challenge is that we ever said less than this was acceptable.
Yeah.
Let's just get it good and solid.
Mm-hmm.
And that should have been the minimum. And because everybody's going to do the minimum.
Yeah. Well, I was about to bring that up, was when you start looking at frameworks, though, they're not in the small business side. They're not going to say SSO is part of your framework. And so people just aren't asking the questions because like you said, it's not even listed there. So why should I do it?
Password management is, and this falls under it, but it doesn't say specifically SSO should be one of the tools you consider for managing user access. It falls under that umbrella and doesn't specifically say use this control.
Yeah. And back to the thing I was saying earlier, though, is when you're evaluating all the other things that you should be doing, it's hard to have a conversation about SSO when I've not yet even got them using proper other security.
Exactly.
So it's like we've got to get our head above water first before we start reaching for the lifeboat.
That's a good one. But let's get these things baked in. That's basically what they're saying, and make it where it's attainable and affordable, and not super complicated to develop or to implement and manage. So it's not wrong, but that ain't something you just wave a magic wand and boom, we're going to be there.
No, tis true.
Yep. We ain't reaching for the lifeboat yet, as David said.
All right, folks, that's our show for today. Be sure to join us again next week. And remember, HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
Hey!
Help me with HIPAA. Let's
been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.